Duskmourn House of Horror is here already, and there are a ton of cool cards that are cube-worthy. We have incredibly designed modal spells, insane value engines, and fun play patterns, all of which should lead to some great value and cool inclusions for cube. I also think this is a great set for some niche cubes. If you have an enchantment theme or a Theros cube, there's some incredible new toys for you to try here. I've narrowed down my list to a top 10, but there are more cards I would have loved to talk about and test, so let me know in the comments if I didn't mention your favorite. And if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to Masonzero MTG for more content like this. The new Impending mechanic is like if the Theros gods had Suspend instead of requiring devotion to become creatures. Overlord of the Bale Merc can be cast as an enchantment for 2 mana and enters with 5 time counters on it. When it enters or attacks, you mill 4 cards and can return a creature or planeswalker from your graveyard to your hand. When you play it as a creature or when it becomes one, it is a 5/5. That's pretty good value. It gives the spell a modal quality, letting you cast it for either 2 or 5 mana, and I'm a big fan of those types of spells. I'm also a big fan of cards that let you put permanents into play, and have frequently changed which one I use. I tried Champion of Ronus, Vivian's Arcbow, and Monster Manual, as well as the classic Elvish Piper. What Kona Rescue Beastie brings to the table is 2 major advantages. You can put any permanent into play, not just a creature, and it doesn't cost any mana to use the ability. The only downside is that you need to find a way to tap Kona before your second main phase. The easiest way is to simply attack, but if you're not able to, Kona will clearly shine in a cube that has vehicles, Convoke, or cards like Springleaf Drum or Rishkar. But again, your choice of which green cheat card you have in your cube is going to really depend on your environment. When I play Magic in person, I'm always rifling through my graveyard in case I have some card with flashback or something that can return from the graveyard to the battlefield. So when I saw Undead Sprinter, I knew I'd want to use it for cube. It's a 2/2 with Trample and Haste, which is already a pretty good start, but you can also cast it from your graveyard if a non-zombie creature died this turn, and then it enters with a +1/+1 counter on it. The challenge here will be making sure something dies before combat, but since Black-Red generally has plenty of sacrifice outlets and sacrifice fodder, as well as removal spells, I can't imagine it being too hard to bring Undead Sprinter back whenever you need to. There are already a ton of mono-black cards that can bring themselves back, and I think this compares favorably with them, so it's really going to depend on the existing contents of your cube if you like Undead Sprinter as much as I do. Untimely Malfunction is a new red modal spell that offers 3 great options. The best part is, these options are incredibly varied, which means any red deck might want these. For 2 mana at instant speed, you can destroy a target artifact, change the target of a spell or ability, or prevent up to 2 creatures from blocking. I think this will replace Abrade in many cubes since it's a great non-burn spell, and that target changing ability is pretty unique and might result in some fun and unexpected blowouts. Like, for example, redirecting Ancestral Recall to target you instead of the person who cast it. Abhorrent Oculus. People seem a little divided on Abhorrent Oculus, but I think it looks pretty fun and silly. This is a 3 mana 5/5 that also requires you to exile 6 cards from your graveyard in order to cast it. That's the bad part. The good part is that it's a flying 5/5, and on each of your opponent's upkeeps you manifest Dread. You of course have to get enough cards in your graveyard to start with, but you're in blue, so there's a lot of card draw and discard and a lot of mill. There are also a lot of reanimation cards, especially ones that can specifically reanimate creatures with mana cost 3 or less, putting this in a very nice spot. One of blue's biggest issues is that you often don't have a ton of creatures in your deck, and you need to draw into your big threats. This card can turn your extra lands and spells into 2/2 creatures, and can also fill your graveyard if you have anything else that cares about that or other delve cards. This card might need some specific support, and it might not be for every cube, but I think it does have a lot of potential. Live or Die is one of the cleanest designs I've seen in this set. It's a 5 mana instant that can return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield or destroy a creature. These modes are both a little bit overcosted, but the instant speed can make a big difference. I think the ideal scenario is using the reanimate mode, which is the more fairly costed one. Since it is an instant, you can reanimate a large blocker and destroy an opponent's creature while still getting your own creature back. But of course, it's nice to have a murder on hand, even if that murder costs 2 more mana than it's supposed to. Now obviously this isn't going to be for high-powered cubes, but it's great for low to mid-power environments due to putting 2 great options onto 1 card. This new vehicle might turn into some great removal from low to mid-power cubes. Unidentified Hovership is a 3 mana artifact that can exile a creature with toughness 5 or less. So hey, kinda like Banishing Light, but more limited? Maybe a lot more limited? But hey, can Banishing Light turn into a 2/2 with flying? That's right, Unidentified Hovership is also a vehicle. It only has crew 1, so a measly token can crew it, and then it's a 2/2 with flying. However, when it leaves the battlefield, your opponent manifests dread, so they could potentially get an extra creature, but they won't get the creature back that you stole. The biggest comparison here is Skyclave Apparition. Skyclave has the same stats, except without flying, and it can exile any non-land, non-token permanent, not just a creature, but that permanent does have to have mana value 4 or less. Then when it leaves, the owner gets a creature token with power and toughness equal to the mana cost of the exiled card, so a 4/4 at most. These two cards are very similar. The Hovership's advantages are of course flying, it generally dodges sorcery speed removal, and it's pretty easy to crew, but both are pretty similar and I think you'd be correct to run either. It's also important to point out that Skyclave and Hovership are more restrictive than Banishing Light types of cards, but they steal the creature forever, and there's more interesting play patterns involved with them, so there are many choices depending on what removal you want to run, how simple you want your cards to be, and how interactive you want your players' decks to be. A lot of people are annoyed with Withering Torment, which can destroy a creature or enchantment in black, but I think it's going to end up in a lot of people's cubes regardless. Sure, you do lose 2 life, and you only pay 3 mana, but that's a small price to pay for what many people consider to be a color pie break. This is, again, not a card I expect to see in super high power cubes. Feed the Swarm is going to be a better choice for taking out powerful enchantments, but Withering Torment's 2 life limit is going to feel a lot better than Feed the Swarm when it comes to taking out giant creatures or enchantments in a lot of games, so I think a good portion of cubes will prefer this card, even though 3 mana is a lot for a kill spell. With so many efficient burn spells out there like Lightning Bolt, Lightning Strike, and Abrade, sometimes it's nice to find a slightly worse version that has more versatility and gameplay patterns. And that's why Chainsaw is an interesting cube possibility. It's a 2 mana red artifact equipment that deals 3 damage to a creature when it enters. When 1 or more creatures die, you put a rev counter on it, and the equipped creature gets +1/+0 for each rev counter. Equip 3 is a lot for an equipment in 2024, and the floor for this, assuming you can equip it, is 5 mana for Ragefire plus Bonesaw on 1 card. Does 5 mana justify combining 2 cards that would normally equal 3 mana total? 2 bad cards at that? Maybe if you're able to keep the Chainsaw out while things continue to die, but it's still pretty expensive for an equipment that grants no evasion. However, this is made much better by a cube that already runs Goblin Engineer or Goblin Welder and has an artifact and artifact recursion package. If you do, this slots right in as it's repeatable removal that isn't completely unwanted by non-artifact red decks. I think not every cube will want this, but I think the cubes that do will be very excited to have it as an option. Floodpits Drowner has a lot of text on it for an uncommon, and it's a lot of very good text. It's a 2/1 for 2 with flash and vigilance, and when it enters you tap a creature and put a stun counter on it. This is already way better than my favorite Blink Tapper Frost Trickster, but it does get better. By paying 2 and tapping it, you shuffle the Floodpits Drowner and a creature with a stun counter on it into their owner's libraries. This is weird blue removal, and in a vacuum this may be worthwhile in blue on its own. Just to flash this in on the end step, stun something, then on your turn activate the ability. But in a dedicated blink deck, you can respond to the ability by blinking your Floodpits Drowner so it doesn't get shuffled, but the opponent's creature does. And if they don't have any untapped creatures, you could actually just attack first, since this creature has vigilance. There are a lot of potential options and play patterns here with this card, and I don't think you need other cards that give stun counters to make it even remotely playable. I think it just works on its own. So those are 10 cards that I'm looking forward to in Duskmourn, but there are even more that I'm excited to try in various environments, and I'm sure you are too. So let me know in the comments what has caught your eye and what you're going to test. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next Masonzero MTG video. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss it.